Hi, Chanel.
Hi, we're back again. We are back again.
Definitely. So our viewers are coming in. Hello, everyone. This is Miss Chanel Rowe. We're just waiting for our other counterpart to join us
And
from
I'll
the
say
Rotary Club
that
Kingston.
I'll say that I personally, I always tell people miss makes me feel very, very old. It's just like wait until I hit 50, then you probably can go miss or
Yeah,
misses. Chanel is fine.
yeah. Let me try to add. Um,
Jordan.
yeah. I noticed that she's trying to join, but keep accepting it, and it's not allowing her to join.
Ooh,
Oh,
child.
she's here now.
Hi, I'm here. How is everyone?
So, first of all, it is Saturday morning. Shout out to our teams who are on projects this morning. My name is Andre, and I am the International Service Director of the Rotary Club of Mandeville. And I'm joined this morning by, of course, my directress over there from the Rotary Club of Kingston,
Good
Jordan.
morning. Good morning, everyone.
So Jordan also is the International Service Director of the Rotary Club of Kingston. And of course, our guest this morning, come through,
This is
Miss
like,
Chanel Rove. Hey. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are back again with another live, right? And we are going to be addressing some much needed discussions on conflict resolution this morning. And of course, as we progress, we will take your questions. So we are on 3 different channels this morning. Ms. Robe has one, Director Jordan has one, and of course, I'm on the Rotary Club of Mandeville. So please take your time with us and look forward to your questions. So, Chanel, you have the floor. Go ahead, introduce yourself to the people.
I'm laughing because obviously, Andre, your mommy would be proud. You're very, very polite because I just told him that his friend called me Chanel and he goes, Miss Chanel again. But so applause on that one. I'm applauding you for your mommy, right? But my name is Chanel Rove, as Andre said. I am a client experience specialist. And just in case you're wondering what that means, I get asked that question quite a lot, right? I work with Christian female coaches to help them create great client experiences so that they're able to have successful clients. And a lot of that successful clients is also dealing with conflict, that portion of it, as well as to grow their businesses with excellence and have greater impact, right? So I think today what we're going to be talking about some conflict resolution. Fun stuff. Right? And just to give you some background of my journey, I recently started my own business, The Robe Way. But before that, I spent over 8 to 9 years in corporate Jamaica, working on various international projects, etc., heavily based in IT as a project and program manager. So dealing with people was a big part of what I had to do because, project management and program management is about managing people and getting them to do things on time, on budget, and the whole work.
Yeah, on schedule,
right?
everything. Yes, girl.
And once you're dealing with people, guess what comes up?
Conflict!
There you go. It's like, let me tell you guys, I am not an only child. I always give this joke. I probably need to stop giving it. I'm not an only child, so I don't deal well with talking to myself. So I think when I started doing lives and started doing presentations, I had a hard time with that because I don't know how to just talk to a screen. So feel free to interact as much as you want because I love it. I'm not an only child. I'm the second of 4 children.
We're here for you this morning, so you're not alone.
Yes, and so Natasha said the different personalities. Yes, you're gonna have conflict because of so many different reasons. And I thought it would just be really interesting to actually talk about what the definition of conflict is because everybody hear conflict and you're like, yeah, we're having conflict, but what does conflict actually mean? Right? And I actually went and looked it up. And it basically, I went and looked it up because I'm coming here with dictionary definition, right? And the classic dictionary definition of conflict is that it's a clash. And when I heard the word clash, I immediately thought to myself, like, like crashing the cars kind of thing. Or you watch those movies and the villain and the hero does clash. Yeah. And that means that's two opposing sides, right? And it's a clash of either your opinions, your interests, or your principles or values.
Okay.
Right? That's at the root of every conflict. Oh, Natasha said violence. Yeah. Well, we try to resolve conflict without glass bottles and violence. That will put us in prison. And that's what we want to avoid, which is why we're talking about conflict resolution today. Right? But it's that clash. And the thing is, when you look at a lot of conflicts, if you look at what's at the root of it, you'll find that it's a difference in your interest, valuation of that, difference in opinion, or it's a difference in values. And if you look at some of even the common conflicts that are in mainstream media today, party against party, political party against political party, religion against religion, it's a clash of principles and values. It's a clash of interest versus whatever. Even some stuff about even like housing developments where build here versus build there kind of thing is a clash of interests, right? And then vaccine versus not is a clash of opinions. Right? So, and I think that's one of like my first thing is that when we think about conflict, we shouldn't just look at just the surface of it. We should actually seek to understand what's the underlying factor for it. Right? Because a lot of times conflict, what's on the surface, people shooting up people, it's not just about people shooting up people, it's about that clash of your interest, your opinion, or anybody remember what was the third one?
Your values.
And there you go. Right? So she's getting that. Jordan is over there getting that A+. Let's see if Andre can catch up.
I feel like Jordan
So we're gonna see if Andre can catch up before we finish to get to that A+. You're trailing behind, Andre. Let's get there. Let's get there. Now, let's talk about some types of conflict. Right? I mean, we talked about what's at the root, but some types of conflicts. What are some of these things that actually cause conflict? Right? Beyond the underlying thing, the ones that you'll actually see on the surface. And some of those things would be overstepping your boundaries, right? Especially if they're established, right? It can also be a matter of overstepping boundaries that have not been set, right? Because a lot of us like to say, oh, we have boundaries and oh my God, this is what we're supposed to do, whether you're in a company, whether you're on a team, whether you're in a relationship, whether you're part of a country, whatever segment or group that is. A lot of people will say that they have boundaries. But then comes the question, is that boundary explicitly clear, right? Or is that boundary in your head where you're expecting that because it's common sense, and we all know that common sense is not always that common, right? That you're expecting somebody to be able to pick up on that. And so when those boundaries aren't met, whether they're set or not, and we want to get to that one, lack of communication, yes. When those boundaries aren't met, then you have conflict. You probably want to beat off somebody and all of that lovely stuff. But we'll get to that because we'll get to that when we talk about conflict resolution strategy. We don't beat up anybody here, right?
That's all.
Not here, right? Then somebody also mentioned poor communication. A lot of us like to think that we're great communicators, but the truth is we're not always. Sometimes we let feelings get in the way. We'll let assumptions get in the way. And this is something that I see even a lot, even as a client experience specialist now. And one of the things that I actually help my clients with is because a lot of times they'll get clients on board and they think that they're communicating clearly, like, oh, you need to do step A, step B, step C. And then when you look at it, there's so much room for assumption around what step A actually means or how it should be done that you end up with conflict because now your clients aren't getting the results that they'll want. Your boss isn't getting the result that he would want. The company isn't getting the result that, and we all know you have to deal with CEOs and all of that lovely stuff. And CEO come and ask you and the directors come and ask you, so what's the status of X, Y, and Z? I know we were supposed to be at 100% on this major thing. Why isn't it there? Right? And it could actually be a matter of fact that you didn't communicate clearly that, oh, when I said that we'll be at 100% for this activity, we're talking about a subdivision of the activity and not the overall thing. Right? So lack of clear communication. Now, another example is, this is a big one, is it's a really big, right, is when you don't define roles and responsibilities clearly, right? So you kind of like assume Andre is going to do it, and well, Andre assume Jordan is going to do it, Jordan assume Andre is going to do it, and then it doesn't get done, and then it's just like you suddenly have this whole conversation, but I thought you were going to do it. No, I thought you were going to do it. But the thing is, it's not done. Right? It wasn't communicated and the responsibilities weren't explicitly clear. The roles and the responsibilities weren't clear. And so even in your job, I've seen this happen so many times, right? Where companies will actually come in and say that, okay, we're hiring for this role. And they'll define a JD a foot long. I don't do well with measurements, so probably a foot is probably not right. Right? But the essence of it, they'll define a job description long, and then when the person comes into the organization, that JD doesn't match anything that person is supposed to be doing, and then suddenly you have that communication piece coming in because now they're asking you to do X, Y, and Z when you didn't have that expectation that you would have been doing X, Y, and Z. And then even in, say, your projects, because I remember my background is from project and program management, right? This is why one of the things is very, very important to plan upfront and assign out who's doing what task and when that task is supposed to be done. Because if you don't set those boundaries in place, if you don't set those roles and responsibilities in place, if you don't have that clear communication, guess what you're going to have?
Conflict.
What's your Yes, and so it's very, very important. So Andre is coming up, Jordan. I'm just saying. Before you know it, Andre might indeed come out on top of the class. Well, we talk about that as a strategy for resolving conflict, where you'll realize that that's actually a strategy. So keep going, Andre. Cheering you on. Right? So it's very important that when you're thinking about conflict and how to avoid conflict, I guess that should be that subheading, to ensure that you're actually defining those things up front to set expectations, because when those expectations aren't set, you're just opening the door for conflict to arise sooner rather than later. You really want to avoid conflict where possible. Yeah. Right? The next there I have like 3 more, right? And I'm actually looking down at my notes. I actually made notes for this. I normally don't talk from notes, right? But I made notes for this one just to ensure that I don't miss anything, right? This is a big one that we have been seeing a lot in recent times, right? And for me, I like to term it unaddressed feelings, which comes out as a need to defend your territory.
Yeah.
Right? And if you want to, let's talk about this one. One of the things that we have seen a lot in recent times around the world and in Jamaica, because we're local as well, is this whole thing of crime and this person shooting this person, or this family member killing this family member.
Yeah, always
extreme. The extreme thing, and we'll talk about that when we get down to how to resolve conflict. We'll get on that, right? But at the root of it, if you think about it, a lot of times it's unaddressed feelings are at the root of that. And therefore, a man come out and be like, yo, you're not defending your honor, like kind of thing. You're defending your territory, right? And because, have that peer pressure and that need to say, okay, my feelings got hurt. I didn't like how you deal with that. Let's have a conflict. And the quickest thing for me to resolve this conflict is to kill you.
Boom.
That's it. And that's where bottles.
Final.
Yes, and that's where the glass bottles come in. Soda boy,
but
this is it.
The decision is so final as well, because having absolutely no thought about it, you just make a snap decision, death. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's for me is something that I like to talk about, because there is a framework that I have in mind when I think about how to deal with conflict. Mm-hmm. And it's stop. Conflict happens. You stop. You think. You feel, and then you act.
In so many cases, though, and I'm sorry for generalizing in this particular case, but when we as Jamaicans, some of those steps are actually eliminated.
Yeah.
You don't stop. You
just jump right to action.
Yeah. Man, this year at the same time. And you realize even in the simplest of conflicts, you will see, for example, somebody step on your toe, and your immediate thing is to go from the step on the toe to moving over to acting. You cuss the person serious, throw a glass. Look at that. Even throw the glass bottle.
That's so true.
But then again, the notion still remains where us as Jamaicans, we don't throw bottles. I'm pretty sure there's a machete somewhere in the
yes.
Yeah. So I mean, bottles. Yeah, if you're drinking something, but otherwise you're straight to the vehicle for your machete or whatever.
Somebody said it's Stephania Clark's.
Natasha also says, and this is very common, Natasha says, ready to push them down, run up in a big chunk, boof, right?
Yeah. And that's so true. This is really, really true, because a lot of people just miss those intermediary steps. Just need to process. That's all you need to do. The think and feel thing is just a process, and determine. Look at the consequences, determine how do I actually need to react in this extreme or not, versus just it happens, react in the extreme, and then be like, oh, sorry, when you end up at prison. So it's like, I never know this would have mashed up my life.
Yeah, and trust me, it's something that is so seldomly done. People just jump straight to the extreme. Yeah.
And we constantly think about the extreme as being the only factor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Natasha Burnett says, and processing can take some time. For me, it is.
I agree with that. And it's not bad to want to process for days, because I've had situations where something happens to me and my brain is in such a turmoil about it that I literally say to you, I'm not going to react, I'm not going to respond, etc. I need space to think about it. I need space to process, because I know if I react out of just it happening, it ain't gonna be pretty.
Yeah.
And this girl orange don't go well with me, so well, Jamaica don't actually have where orange thing, but prison and me don't work together because I have big plans. Right? Can't do anything from prison, right? But that for me is the critical thing, is that you don't even have to let anybody rush you to actually come up with a reaction. You don't have to. And I feel like a lot of times, because of peer pressure or certain standards across society, people actually feel like they just need to react the moment it happens, when it would have been much wise and yeah, it would demonstrate some wisdom in just pausing to actually think about it, and you realize a green jumpsuit and just realize well, green, I wear green really well, so, but still, no, the prison factor is a problem. I wear green outside of prison,
Fuck,
right?
fuck, fuck, fuck.
But yeah, pause and just think about, just process, and then you're able to respond from a place of having processed it
Yeah.
before. Yeah. Right? I think we kind of jumped into like the strategies to actually resolve conflict, that big piece being a process and my actual framework around it. But I did want to actually touch back on two others roots of summer conflicts. And these are two important ones that I've actually come across. I come across these two quite a lot.
Okay.
And that's a clash in personality. Right?
That's real.
Oh yes. When you have the office girl, you say, no, me not like that girl because X, Y, and Z. My spirit not take her. But guys, note, even if your spirit don't take the person, you still have to work with the person.
Yes.
Allegedly.
What you going to get them fired? Right? No, but you still have to work with the person. And I think for me, one of the biggest or one of the greatest lessons that I ever learned was early in my career. We did the company I was with trained all its employee on understanding personalities, right? I think the one that they actually trained us on was DISC, DISC.
Oh.
Right? And basically that was that persons have a mixture. Everybody have a mixture or two major ones of those four. You have a dominant personality, you have an influential personality, meaning you're happy-go-lucky and you just like relationships kind of thing. You have a steady personality, or what was the C again? Well, I don't remember the C right now, but the C, I know that one had to do more with you're more compliant. Oh, that was the word. I associated that one with compliant. You like to follow the rules, you like to have processes and standards, etc. in place for you to follow. And why this actually became important for me, right, is because in dealing with project management and dealing with people, personality clashes will come up. And sometimes it doesn't have to be as extreme as, oh my God, I really, really don't like this person. Mm-hmm. But your approach, the approach that you would take, I'm a very driven, I'm a D, right? DI, right? So depending on the side of the personality that you get the I sometimes where I'm just like really up there and just happy-go-lucky and just side. Yes. And then if on a serious note, you'll get the more driven side of me, the dominant person that is goal-oriented. I just want to get things done, moving on. I don't focus on conflict. I don't focus on the conflict and the effects of the conflict. I see the problem and I immediately want a solution. That's that person I am, right? And that makes projects successful. Mm-hmm. But it also meant that I had to learn, which was why I kind of like, let's say my adaptive state, that is the state that I work on when I work with other people, etc., became my ID, because I realized that in my natural state of being a dominant, influential person, it rubbed people the wrong way. Like I can tell you a secret. I have actually, well, it ain't a secret because so many of y'all are here. Yeah. But early in my career, it got so bad that people would literally say, somebody actually came to me and said to me, Chanel, to be honest, there are people who believe that you're a B. And it took a while to kick in. Andre got it real quick. Right? And it made me pause to assess, because I realized that if I was serious about actually doing project management and doing program management for as long as I did program management solely, I couldn't continue with that sort of energy. It was my personality and me wanting to get things done, and it wasn't that I was stepping on anybody's toe, but it rubbed people the wrong way. Yeah. And so from this, I learned that this is how different persons work. And I learned how to basically figure out which personality persons that I was working with had. And therefore, having figured that out, I knew how to interact with them better. And so I ended up with, I don't think there's any ever team after that I worked with that didn't end up loving me, right? Because I was a girl who could switch from being driven straight to having a general chat with you because I realized that you needed that relationship
That
more. I was
personal,
also the
yeah.
person who had, exactly, I was also the person who understood that, yeah, you probably need a checklist for you to be more comfortable, to get in, to know what task you need to check off and all of that. I learned that. And a key example for me of when this understanding actually really kicked in is on one of my final projects. This was actually an international project. We had a stakeholder who just refused to sign off. And I thought to myself, it was just a simple thing. Like, I couldn't understand, like, why this
Like,
person just
the sign it.
won't sign off. We have done the due diligence and support. And I remember we went into a meeting with this person and some other stakeholders relating to that person who needed to do the sign off. And as they talked, I paused and I listened. And it was a room full of accountants, right? And I realized in listening to them, it's not that they had a problem with signing off, which was what we thought the problem was. They had a problem with not having any measurable base by which they could actually check that what they were signing off to made sense.
Yeah.
Right? And so they wanted like a checklist to say that, okay, we're going to check X, Y, Z. We're going to check X, Y, Z. We're going to check to ensure that your numbers are fine. This is how we're going to prove that your numbers haven't changed from what they were before, etc. And so until we got into that room and had that, well, it was a team's room. Still a room. Yeah, still a room, don't it? Team's room. Right? Still a room. But until we got together and had that sort of conversation, and this was it, this sign off held us up for like 3 weeks. 3 weeks. We're back and forth and we're like, oh my God, escalating to this person. And then I'm like, but there must be something. What is it that we're missing? There's obviously some sort of conflict that's happening that one's party isn't aware of. And we got them together, right? And within 24 hours after us having that conversation and be able to provide that assurance and identifying the underlying root cause to the conflict, we're able to do what made them more comfortable, and we achieved that sign-off. Right?
So you had to adapt. Yeah.
You had to adapt, and it's not just the adapting, it's also to understand what was at the root of the conflict. Right? Because if you remember what we went back to, it was what the interest, the opinion, the principles, and the values. And in this case, it was that their interest, they didn't feel like their interest was aligned.
Yeah.
Squeaky says in the chat, I think I'm very good at switching, but it can be overwhelming and exhausting. How do you find balance?
Balance in terms of what?
So
I think she's possibly mentioning the fact that switching to adaptability, mentioning your DISC values earlier, where you adapted to overcome, so to speak. So she's saying that it's possibly overwhelming to switch because sometimes it is hard to switch. You know, so how do you find balance between adapting and actually just moving on?
I think for me, it wasn't even a matter of finding that balance. It was a matter of understanding that wanting success meant needing to adapt, right? It meant getting along with your team well, ensuring that everybody was on the same page, and so forth. And so having that understanding of what each person needed in order for them to thrive and be successful and make us as a whole team be successful, right? As the manager for that team, right, I was willing to take myself out of my comfort zone because it wasn't all the time comfortable for me, right? I wasn't used to being chatty at work, right? Or just calling up somebody to say, hey, I'm checking in on you. And we just have a general chat where I learn about somebody's rooster, or that somebody was learning French, or that this is what this person was having for lunch, or this, all of that. It wasn't that. I was totally comfortable when I started with it, but I understood that it was necessary for some people. Some people needed that kind of thing in order for them to be more effective. right? They
Yeah.
needed to have that trust and relationship factor.
Yeah. And I think also it kind of helps with team buy-in when you really take that time to nurture those relationships. It's easy to say, hey, can you do this for me, please, and get it to me by X time. They don't feel like it's pressure. They just feel like, yeah, I believe in this project too. She cares about me. She wants to do. She wants it to be done well to the standard of the company, and definitely,
Yeah. And I think one of the things is you talked about balance. I think when you first start, you might find it just a bit uncomfortable, but after a while, I wasn't just doing this from a place of, oh, this is what needs to be done. I
Mhm.
was doing it from a place of, I genuinely cared about the person,
yeah,
right? And persons can actually sense when you're fake versus
for
not.
sure,
Right?
for
It's
sure.
just like, why this girl calling me up again and again, like, and then them chatting behind your back, right? But so you have to be genuine about it, and it's just not coming from a place of being fake. Because when you come from it from a genuine perspective, as Jordan said, then you have a cohesive team who's willing to
Yeah.
work together, who's willing to go the extra mile,
Yeah.
right? And then my team as well, they knew that I wasn't going to ask them to do anything that I was not willing to do,
Mm.
Okay. Well, and
right?
since we now have an understanding of what exactly adaptability is, I just want to point out the comment that Natasha shared. She says, adapting even when it is exhausting because you're remaining committed to the end goal. I would like to hear how you would deal with such a situation where even when it's exhausting, you adapt basically to foster that growth.
I think this
That's
is
a good question.
comes in.
That's a good thing, and I think this is where balance comes in,
Mm-hmm.
because I've seen where, and this is me talking even from my own experiences. It's a mistake that I made a whole lot of times in terms of overworking and overstretching
Mm-hmm.
in order to win, right?
Yeah.
And I believe I'm a person who I'm extroverted, introverted. Sometimes I really love people. Sometimes I just it's like I don't want to see y'all kind of thing. I don't want to talk to y'all, and that's fine, right? Those are my boundaries, right?
Yeah.
And so I had to also realize, and I realized if I stretched over in one area too much, right? It drained the other side of me. Like, oh my God, it's just I would literally have burnouts, right?
Yep.
And then yeah, burnout from dealing with people too
People
much.
too much.
Like
Yeah.
that's possible, right? And then on top of that, if you stretch too much into one area of wanting to engage and so forth, it also limited the time that you actually had to get work done in work time. And so that stretched over into your personal life, which in fact that affected your personal life, your friends, your friendships, family life, and all of that lovely jazz and stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And so for me, it was also important for me to learn to find that balance between between giving my team what they need and also ensuring that I had what I needed, right? And sometimes what I had to do is I'd get creative, get creative about it. I know my team needs to have that fellowship time and so forth. So
Yeah.
I even turn half of my team meet, not even half of my team meetings, like the first couple minutes of my team meetings and my check-in meetings, we're just
Yeah.
chatting, we're just relaxing and we're catching up a little bit like, hey, this is what's happening with you, this is what's happening with you, etc. We laugh a few times. And
Mm-hmm.
then we jump into guys like we jump into business. But
Yeah.
then because of even my personality, when we jump into business, no, I'm not afraid to crack jokes at you. So get y'all laughing and just get y'all chilled and relaxed, right? So
Yeah.
it's also about you know you need that balance, but find creative. Get creative about it so that you don't overstretch your personal boundaries and put yourself in harm's way with burnout.
Okay. Natasha, I do hope Chanel answered your question perfectly. That was a mouthful. And
Oh,
I like to assume that the takeaway was given. So I can really appreciate how you developed your answer for us, Chanel.
oh, thank you. Actually, no, Natty, no. Nat and I went to high school together.
Also,
So
Ah, okay.
she has prior knowledge.
maybe not. Do you?
Okay.
I was just riding the Woolmerian train. That's it. I'm a
Okay.
Woolmerian, so yeah. So
Me
yeah.
time. That's not joking, Natasha.
No,
Yeah,
but I just sorry, Chanel. I just have to. But I mean, I want to shout out the Wolmerians in the house because I mean, it would kind of be remiss of me not to because I don't want to be taking off this thing. You know, these Wolmer's people, y'all are very patriotic. So yes, Wolmer's.
it looks like I get caught a guess. Yes.
Listen,
I'm just
I don't
saying.
think I don't know what that means, but yes,
It means whatever you do, do it well. So you're learning something today, right? Don't
yeah,
you? You're
yes,
learning extra.
yeah. So so Chanel, in terms of everything that is happening right now, like are there any particular strategies that you could give us that mitigates against conflict? I mean, in the case where the Rotary movement, we worked best in teams. Like for a lot of things we work in teams, and there is a possibility that you might have a conflict brewing somewhere. As you said, we know about them, we don't know about them. What are some strategies that you could provide for us to like mitigate those conflicts from ever arising?
Well, I would say that there are two approaches to it. You can actually be proactive, or you can be reactive, right? But the way that you react to conflict is very, very important. I did touch on some of the proactive ways before, when we talked about on establishing those boundaries, um, having that proper communication and open channels. That's
Mm-hmm.
important. People need to feel like they can actually talk to you. Ensuring that you define those roles and responsibilities. Don't feel that need to defend your territory. The stop, think, feel, and then act kind of thing. Understanding the personality types. And oh, there was one other. I actually realized I missed this one. We
Yeah.
jumped on. This was the fear of the unknown. There are people that we have to understand that fear kicks in, right? And if you're not sure of what the outcome is going to be, and I found this to happen a lot with my projects because we're always changing from one thing to the next, right?
Yeah.
That resistance to change as well, or even in Rotary, in terms of changing from one leadership, do you call it leadership board, to another leadership board, transitioning out the leaders of Rotary
Yeah.
in your various clubs. That's a change. And there are people who will be resistant to that because they're like, yeah, but that means my favorite is going, or my favorite didn't win the election, etc., and all of that, right? See, that's politics, even
Yeah.
that's on a
It's
national scale,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But it's a resistance to change and having that fear of the unknown. So that's something else that you also have to put measures in place to ensure that you're able to communicate clearly that this is what's going to happen, etc., etc. Which is why I kind of like fell into organizational change management as well, because I was a project manager, certified project manager that was, and I realized that one of the biggest risk that we were having with all of these major projects where we're changing out and this is like on a national scale and an international scale, changing out one thing into the other, people had that fear of change, right? People were resistant to change because they had that fear of change and not knowing what was going to happen. And so organizational change management helped us to actually plan how we could help people adapt to change.
Mm.
Yes. And so that's something you have to factor in. No matter what the change is, you have to think there are people who are going to be afraid of the unknown and be resistant to it. What are some measures that we can actually proactive measures that we can put in place to ensure that we're easing their way into adapting to it?
Yeah. Okay. So I understand exactly what you're saying about reactive and proactive change. Now, I mean, having done like a little bit of reading, change management, we have actual institutes that go around and they help people to effect change in their organizations, in their leadership, and
Yeah.
so forth. And you mentioning the fact that we're going to have that little clique that is, what is it now? The revolution, so to speak. Like they resist change in so many aspects of it. And as managers, as directors, as presidents, we need to actually mitigate against these changes because change management is something that is 21st century and there is no script for it. So you just have to ebb and
Figure it
flow,
out.
so to
Yeah.
speak. Yeah, yeah.
But even
Thank you
though
so much.
there's no script for it, there are general principles around it, right? They'll tell you have to understand what your stakeholder needs are, what sort of, depending on the type of change, what kind of training or what kind of communication will they need, and all those high level factors. The same way you have like that framework for project management, you have a framework for managing change and
Yeah.
strategies around that. So it's just a matter of just considering what those points are and ensuring that you're putting measures in place based on those strategies to ensure that
Okay,
people,
and I
even though you
have
have a
another
relation, they
question.
don't.
I mean,
Mhm.
I like the questions that are in the chat today. Gabe McLeod says, what are some of the measures you can consider when planning to implement change, as in strategies?
Oh Lord.
That's a good one. Probably even a lengthy one.
I did touch on some of them. And I'll speak about this more. I'm gonna put on my organizational change manager
Yeah.
hat now,
Yay.
right? Right. They'll say to you that you need to have the first thing is understanding the scope of the change. Who are the people who are going to be impacted? What areas of, say, your business or your organization that will actually be impacted by this change? You have to understand what the scope of it is, right?
Yes.
And who are the stakeholders who will be impacted, etc. And then once you have that understanding of that, of the understanding of that need, etc., and that scope, then you're able to put the necessary communication to say, have a communication strategy, right? First, did say strategy. So you have a communication strategy to be able to communicate to these various stakeholders, and you're not doing it at the point the change comes, because I know a lot of
Yeah.
people will do this thing where it's only when the change happens, like, hey guys, we're changing tomorrow. And it's just
Yeah.
like at that point it's too
Yeah.
late. It's too late. You're
Yeah.
too late in the game, right? Because you should have actually been sensitizing people to the change
To what's
coming
coming.
way
Yeah.
before the change arrives, and setting those expectations, giving them that opportunity to ask the question, giving that opportunity to weigh in, giving them an opportunity to adjust and adapt,
Right.
right? And then even from the communication plan, depending on the type of change, you may also need to have a training plan, right? Some way to ensure that if it's a technology change, that people are able to adapt and get used to the whatever system or whatever you're putting in place before.
Yeah.
Again, before, don't just toss it in on people and then be like, yeah, go use
Yeah.
that. Right? And even that's something I even talk about even with my own clients who are just getting clients in, and they will have these systems in their organization already. You can't just bring in people and tell them
Yeah.
that these are the tools I have in my organization and go use it. No,
Yeah.
you have to ensure that they
Love it.
have the necessary training that they need, so that they're able to be successful as possible, right?
Much agreed. Much agreed. Definitely.
Yes. So those are some of like the high tips. You'll also have to think about the risks that will come up and be able to organize, plan and mitigate. And well, we know there are different type of risks. We're going to get into that one, right? Different type of risk and responses, but have the appropriate risk response for the type of risk that you're managing, so it actually doesn't become a full blown issue or a
Ish.
full blown conflict and
Yeah.
all of that lovely stuff. And then you have that reinforcement. I mean, there are different change models out there. I'm sure you guys would have heard of ADCAR. You'd have probably ADCAR is really is, oh Lord, I really don't remember what ADCAR means
I'm
right
trying to
now.
remember myself.
Right?
I mean,
But
for,
mhm.
for, for, for better understanding, let's just say we all know what it is, but we don't remember it.
Yeah.
For better understanding. But yeah, it just talks you to the whole point of doing that. I think it's awareness, desire, knowledge. What does the other A stand for? I don't remember what the other A stand for, and then there's reinforcement,
Yeah.
right? So a lot of people also think that because I trained you up front, means you should get it when I go live. But you should also have measures for reinforcement in place, because people can forget. People can think that they understood it the first time when in fact they didn't, right? So you have that those measures for reinforcement to ensure that change is successful. Because remember, at the end of the day, whatever change or conflict you're having, at the end of the day, you want to ensure that people come out successful.
Agreed.
Very true.
Agreed. Most definitely. President Mark would have shared earlier that at the beginning of each Rotary year, we do a dance, and new teams are forced to figure out each other and know where they occupy in space. Now, I mean, having to figure out somebody, it can be a little bit of work for me because, I mean, for lack of a better term, I'm hot and cold. So if I don't know anybody in this space, I will not open my mouth. Yeah. So I
Wow.
mean, for us, we are forced to observe and have an opinion about somebody when in truth and in fact it can be negated just by the person opening their
Opening their
mouth.
mouth and speaking, trust me.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I would say, as leaders, my challenge to you is leaders lead from the forefront.
Mm.
So, the same way I, as a manager, had to step out and work with my team to get us all kumbayaing. I would say that recommendation as well. A little discomfort up front
Yeah.
will save you a lot of conflict on the back end,
Yeah.
right? So as a leader, step out and your team will follow you.
You know, Chanel, in the current sphere of Rotaract, I've been a president 2 times. I've also served as ADR, and currently, our past district governor made me a Paul Harris Fellow. Now, these things come with a little bit of let's just say uncertainty, and I'm made to feel uncomfortable a lot because I mean I would probably sit in a room and I know nobody, but I'm expected to interact and take away things from these persons, you know. So he constantly puts me on the spot, and as Natasha said, I will have to try. I have been trying. So most of the time I just sit quiet, you know, and try not to make a fool of myself. But I mean, making a fool of yourself sometimes it releases the tension that is
Yeah, it's a
brewing.
part of the curve for
Yeah.
sure.
I'll say this, and you're right. It's one of the biggest tools that I actually learned or I use, right? Because there are persons in the room who will be uncomfortable as well. And if it takes me, the leader, being the one to make a clown of myself, and it's only you make a clown of yourself only if you think you're a clown, right? I just tell them it's my personality to deal with it, right? Kind of thing. Of course, I know how to behave, guys. I do know how to behave, right? But yeah, it's you only feel like a clone if you only act like a clone if you feel like a clone, right? I personally don't believe that anybody can make me feel like a clone if I know I'm being myself, right? So I think that's one important thing. And as I said before, I think I forgot my other point. Yeah, but the clone piece, right? And being willing to just step out and be that discomfort, because once you get the discomfort is normally evidence of like what's the terminology that you'll actually use for that? Fear, a little bit fear of the unknown. That's the
Yeah.
discomfort. Like so, once you push past that and you're like, so you're in the unknown, that discomfort goes. Once you're in your element, that discomfort goes, right? You don't agree with that.
Well, I definitely agree with that because I mean, persons will say to me, I would say to a lot of persons prior to meeting me, "Hey, so I'm socially awkward." You know, I think I said that to George.
Just
You
a
know,
small brief.
yeah. I said, okay, so I'm socially awkward, and I mean, as Nat said, she said, oh, we met in person. It wasn't awkward. Maybe for you, it wasn't awkward, you know. But I mean, hey, I'm getting there, and I thank you for that. Thank you for those gems, Chanel. And my final takeaway from this is there are things we do and we should not do. Now, what are some of these things that we could possibly use that or do or say that could mitigate or basically just not have conflict? So there are
I
some things
think.
you do and there are some things
Mhm.
that you don't do.
All
Conflict.
right. I think these would more be what I call the reactive strategies because we already touched on the proactive ones. Put some of these things in place and you reduce the likelihood of conflict. But what happens if you do end up in conflict, right? I know you have to fix it. The first thing I'll say is attack the problem, not the person. A lot of us love to engage in the whole blame game, like, you did
You
this,
did.
you never did this, and oh yes,
And
and
you
don't
were
be petty.
supposed to
That's
this.
a you were supposed to do it. Natasha said, and don't be petty. That fall under the blame game too. It's just like, yeah, you're right. Yeah, we're not saying about that, but that's the whole point of it. And you get so focused on attacking the person that the person now becomes defensive, and you get nowhere,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? And as somebody who is big on solving problems, right? I don't like not getting anywhere. So my brain always zones in on, okay, this happened. This is the result that we now have. What can we do to fix it? Attack the problem, right? And in attacking the problem, here's the funny thing. You may have to get a bit vulnerable. You may have to be self-aware because a lot of times, and we don't like to admit this, our body language says something different from what our mouth is saying,
For sure.
right?
Face.
Your face says something like, I'm like, yeah, I understand. I'm just like, I want to kill you right now, kind of thing.
Boom.
And
Yeah.
your entire demeanor is screaming like, if I could just catch you, I'd strangle you, kind of thing. And that's not good. So you have to be very, very self-aware and realize that take that time. Again, that's important. The processing piece that we talked about, taking that time to process and come to terms with what you're feeling, so that you're not projecting something that you don't believe, or you're not saying one thing and your body is saying something else, right? So be very, very self-aware. Sometimes that self-awareness means that you have to be vulnerable. And we know this is a view word that everybody finds really, really, really uncomfortable
Like,
because
feel my
vulnerable, right? Get all up in my emotions, and I have to do that at work. No, my dear. But William said big girls don't cry or something like that, right? But, and I'm not saying you're gonna cry. I'm not saying you're gonna cry. But what I'm saying is, in not attacking the person, sometimes you have to say, here's how this action made me feel.
Yeah.
Right? Or here's what I thought. Here's my perspective of what of your intent. Is that correct?
That's true. That's a big one. I use that all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? And so attacking that's very, very different from coming out and say, I know you didn't want this to fail, and oh my God, you're the worst, and XYZ, attacking the person.
Blah blah blah. Yeah.
You know the deadline was coming up and you never do XYZ, right? And that falls into a whole lot of assumptions too. I realize now I like to use XYZ a lot. I need to get that out of my vocab. Right?
But I mean, Chanel, like in so many instances, like I noticed that President Mark would have mentioned as well. Also, be kind to yourself too. And I mean, that's a very good drawback, because if you think you're being kind to yourself, then I mean, I think the right thing or the right thing to do would to, of course, be open about it, you know?
Well, everybody don't always do the right thing, right?
That's true.
Right. Yeah, and then there's also the fact that what society thinks is right is not necessarily what's the right thing to do, right? Because when you kick in peer pressure and oh my God, you have to go defend it. What we call it, defend the thing. I'll probably show my age with this. Defend the thing. I'm not that old, guys. I'm just saying. But I'm just saying that peer pressure for you, where you feel like you have to defend the thing and you have to get up all up in the person's face and point. I always say that every time you're pointing at somebody, just remember they're four fingers, right? Pointing back at you, right? So you have to be that self-aware. We actually did touch on that one in terms of taking the time to process before responding. I think that's a very, very big one, because what I've also found, and this is me, I'm speaking for myself personally, that a lot of times my first reaction is not normally my final reaction, right? And that when I take time to actually process and assess why one thing made me react a certain way, I realize that sometimes it's because I have issues within me that I need to address, right? And that there are times when we make up a whole big story, right? And be like, this person haven't told for me, when the whole thing is because of what's going on in here, right? Yeah. And you have I'm not going to be a therapist today, but you have a whole lot of things going on in here that needs to be addressed. It colors the way you see things. It colors the way you react to things, right? Which is it's not good, right? So taking that time to process and be true to yourself, and not just be true. A lot of people is like, yeah, man, maybe myself and maybe true to myself, and this is how I am. But if you actually take that time to actually just process, you realize that that ain't the way that's not what the way you are, sweetheart.
People use that's how I say as like a scapegoat, as an excuse to remain the way that they are, instead of actually introspecting. So that's a big one.
Oh yes, not we get into that one. The apologize. We get
Mm,
into that one, but we can't touch on that one, right? There
mm.
was a time in my life where I'm like, I'm all that in a bag of chips, and I don't say sorry. Right?
Yeah, I think I'm
I'll be
kind of on
like,
that side of it.
you know, and then this is not an apology, guys. I'm sorry if I stepped on you too. When you know
I'm
to,
sorry about the way
and
you feel.
I just, I'm sorry about the way you feel. Like, no, that's not an apology, right? If you're apologizing, you're acknowledging that you did step on the person's toe. I'm sorry that I
Yeah,
hurt you. I'm
yeah.
sorry that I stepped on your toe. Not if I said, hey, I said what I said. Thank God I'm
Uh,
saved. That's all I'm gonna
uh,
say, right?
uh.
Well, I said what I said and leave it at that. All right, sweetie. Yeah,
I
you
think the
said what
new
you
one,
said.
I think the new one right now is oh sorry, not sorry. That's a
Oh
popular
yeah,
thing
that's
as
on
well
you.
too. Sorry, not sorry. You know. So, but I mean, we have accepted your gems today, and I'm pretty sure that everybody who was live with us today would have taken away so much from your presentation. You know, I just want to shout out the teams of the Rotary Club of Kingston, the Rotary Club of Mandeville, and to everybody else who is live with us. I saw Brazil earlier. All right. I saw all the way from Africa earlier as well. I
I
just want
saw
to say thank you
Mexico.
guys. Mexico. Hey. So listen, we are fully international today. And Chanel, on behalf of both clubs today, I just want to say thank you for coming through. We do appreciate it. And of course, what is conflict? After this, everybody has an understanding. And of course, we are excited to have you and to have interacted with you on that. And we are seeing the note that Nassau was here as well. Shout out to the Bahamians. You know, we appreciate you guys for coming through. So I don't know, Jordan, is there anything that you want to say to Chanel for us?
Chanel, thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's been a pleasure, super informative as always. As you're always a delight. We're really, really happy to have you on.
Well,
All
thank you guys
right.
for having me and hosting my madness, right?
It's
My
welcome.
madness is normal, okay? That's all I'll say.
Agreed. 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 So, I mean, I just want to say to everybody who is watching right now, go right on ahead. Check out the Rotary Club of Kingston. Check out the Rotary Club of Mandeville. I mean, we are not just teens. Everybody is a teenager in Rotaract, right? So we're not just teenagers. We are doing excellent work. We're caring for our members physically and, of course, in the mental space as well. So you can be sure to reach out to any one of our clubs for more information if you need to make a donation as well. And also be sure to check out our upcoming events. And I look forward
Yes.
to seeing you there as well. So, I mean, thanks to everybody for popping in. It was our pleasure to have you. Bye bye.
Okay, goodbye. Thank you.